tonight you're going to get the chance to see the fruits of, or at least a sampling of the fruits of a generous gift from the Russert family. We received his papers, and our students, our history majors in particular, have been busy working on cataloging this and developing this particular website that you're about to see, this exhibit, digital exhibit you're about to see. And so I want to just hand things off to Dr. Malia McAndrew, who is both a professor of history, let's hear a new title.
Director of Teaching Innovation and Enrichment, and Tim Russert Fellow in Public History.
And also the Tim Russert Faculty Fellow in Public History. And so Dr. McAndrew has been leading up this project, and she'll introduce our students and other guests.
When the Russert family donated over 156 linear feet of materials to John Carroll University, we were entrusted with the responsibility of preserving Tim Russert's legacy for the historical record. Our first task, which took over a year and a half, was to curate a digital exhibit. The exhibit features 300 items from the collection that we use to narrate Russert's life story. Working with professional teams at History Associates Incorporated and the Axial Group, tonight John Carroll is proud to unveil Tim Russert, One Man's Impact on the Nation. Over 50 John Carroll University students contributed to the creation of this exhibit. This evening, a few of our students will highlight key features of the web app for you. We're also honored to have two individuals who personally knew Russert with us. In the second part of our program, Pete Williams and Linda Meglin will share their memories of Tim Russert. Afterward, we'll gather for desserts in the atrium, where you'll have the opportunity to explore the site on your own devices. Because Tim Russert's faith was a central part of his identity, I now invite Kaylee Kelly, a John Carroll Master's student in education and fellow Catholic, to lead us in prayer as we begin our gathering.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Tim Russert's Catholic faith and relationship with God were among the most profound influences that shaped his life. The Jesuit Catholic education he received at John Carroll University nurtured his intellect, words, and spirit, just as it continues to do for many of us today. Our education aims to shape individuals who care deeply for others and live with a commitment to a faith that serves the greater good. Mr. Russert found God in all things, whether in the newsroom, his family life, Sunday Mass, or even on the football field. In that same spirit, we gather now to honor him as we open in prayer. Psalm chapter 18, verses 29 to 31. For you, Lord, give light to my lamp. My God brightens my darkness. With you, I can rush an arm's hand. With my God, I can leap a wall. God's way is honoring. The Lord's promise is refined. He is a shield for all who take refuge in him, whose right hand upheld me and favor made me great. Dr. McAndrew will now begin our formal program. Thank you.
So we're going to walk you through a little bit of the exhibit. You can see that the exhibit is organized into a number of categories. When you go to it, click on Life at a Glance, you will see highlights of Tim Russert's life. But then the three kind of main bodies of narrative that we are going to share with you today are about Tim Russert's strong foundations, are about his time at Meet the Press, and are about his life outside the studio. So I've invited 3 of our history majors to narrate this for you. Emma Origi is a senior English and history major. Lauren Seibel is a junior history major, and Cody Patton is a freshman history major.
Tim Russert was many things. An Emmy award-winning news broadcaster, an alumni of John Carroll University, a Catholic, and a die-hard Buffalo Bills fan.
Tim Russert believed that all people should be well-informed and that it was a journalist's responsibility to ask the tough questions. Through the media of television, he asked those questions and broke down American politics in a way the viewers could understand.
As dedicated as Tim was to making Meet the Press the best it could be, he was equally, if not more so, dedicated to his family and community. He knew that the joys of life lay beyond the studio.
In 1950, Timothy John Russert was born to Tim and Elizabeth Russert in Buffalo, New York. Raised in an Irish Catholic household, he remembers, there were crosses above our beds, and every evening when we sat down to supper, one of us said grace. This faith-grounded upbringing would come to have a huge impact on his life and personal philosophy. Through religion, he was reminded that life is bigger than yourself and that everyone has an obligation to be a good person. As a child, Tim was always connected to the church in some way. He was an altar boy during Sunday Mass and attended parish schools. One of his favorite teachers, Sister Mary Lucille Saccarelli, RSM, even helped shape his budding interest in politics and journalism. She encouraged him to start a school newspaper when he was in the 7th grade. In his memoir, Tim remembers her telling him, "God has blessed you with a great deal of potential. It's up to you to turn it into something productive." Tim's fascination with politics and presidents also began in childhood and was sparked in part by the rise of an up-and-coming Irish Catholic politician named John F. Kennedy. "He's one of us," Tim thought, and left to his own devices, the young Tim Russert began inserting Kennedy flyers into the newspapers on his delivery route. When Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, a 7th grade Tim Russert wrote a column honoring the slain president for the school newspaper and even sent copies to Lyndon Johnson, Jackie Kennedy, and Robert Kennedy. He later recalled that that day marked the beginning of my lifelong interest in both politics and journalism. When it came time to pursue high school, Sister Lucille encouraged him to attend Canisius High, a Jesuit high school known for its strong academics. There, Tim was taught to embrace his critical thinking skills. He said, "They welcomed our skepticism, embraced our doubts, and respected our questions." The son of a proud and hardworking garbage collector and newspaper truck driver, Tim was the first member of his family to attend college. Attracted to John Carroll University's Jesuit education, he moved 180 miles away from his family to study political science. Reflecting on his time at JCU, he said, "I loved the experience of living away from home and making new friends. I felt comfortable right away." As a student, Russert became very involved in the student body. He was president of both the Student Union and the University Club. Through these organizations, he advocated for student rights and booked entertainment acts, including the Beach Boys and Muhammad Ali. After graduating, he continued to help the school by booking a little-known musician named Bruce Springsteen. All this interaction with burgeoning celebrities prepared Tim well for his future career, where he would often engage with big political names and even interview presidents. After graduating from John Carroll with a bachelor's degree in political science, Tim attended Cleveland State's Cleveland Marshall College of Law. Following his passing of the bar exam, Tim's political interests turned into a career, becoming a senior staffer for New York Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan and New York Governor Mario Cuomo. Russert interacted with the press a lot during this time and developed a reputation as a master of spin. Russert quickly discovered that learning the truth required asking the right questions. His strong work ethic and clever mind attracted notice from government and media officials. Russert left politics to work for NBC News in 1984. As Senior Vice President of Operations, he was responsible for improving the content and ratings of programs like The Today Show. When the time came for The Today Show to film a news segment on Holy Week in Rome, the NBC team floated the idea of getting the Pope behind the camera. But as a Catholic, Russert knew the Pope never granted exclusive interviews to journalists. Still, he tried, writing to Pope John Paul II and asking him to lead a special televised service. When he received no response, he remembered his father saying, "When you talk to people, speak their language. It shows respect." So he sent the letter again, this time in Polish. The Pope responded and agreed to the segment. It was the Pope's first televised Mass from Pauline Chapel. After the service, the Pope blessed Russert's unborn son. A year later, the Russert family met the Pope again, which is a moment that Tim always remembered fondly. Both a personal and professional high point, meeting the Pope was only the beginning of his distinguished career at NBC. We will now hear from Lauren Seibel about Tim Russert's time at Meet the Press.
NBC's Meet the Press is the longest-running program on television and the first television program to interview a sitting president. Every Sunday morning since 1947, a moderator interviews politicians and world leaders on public affairs, governmental policy, and the economy. Over a dozen journalists have sat behind Meet the Press's desk and questioned American leaders on behalf of the public. Russert became the show's longest-serving anchor, serving behind the desk for 17 years, and he would greatly impact the future of journalism. Despite its illustrious heritage, Meet the Press struggled during the late 1980s. 5 moderators had come and gone within the span of 5 years, and the program was third in the ratings, behind This Week with David Brinkley and Face the Nation. But then, on December 8, 1991, Tim Russert became the host. Russert's influence on the show was remarkable. Under his leadership, the show was expanded from a 30-minute program to a full hour. Over 4 million viewers tuned in to watch Russert, and Meet the Press became the most quoted news program in the world. Much of Russert's appeal came from his down-to-earth charm, commitment to the truth, and lawyer-esque interview style. As a journalist and a broadcaster, he always strived to be prepared. He was well known for doing his homework before each Meet the Press interview. It was common to see piles of newspapers, researched materials, and notes in his NBC office. I would go into each week's program knowing as much about our guests and their positions as I possibly could, Russert recalled. I get up at 5:30, I read 6 or 7 newspapers. Either I'm on the Today Show or I watch the first half hour of the Today Show. Go to work, call my correspondents to various beats, and then start calling people I know and respect. I will call people at conservative think tanks, liberal think tanks, people who are smarter than I am in particular areas, and say, explain this to me, because what I want to be able to do is understand it in a way that I can explain it in a meaningful and understandable way to the viewers. People who work hard all week long, who don't have the benefit or access to these very smart, intelligent people. During interviews, he would cross-examine his guests. He played devil's advocate, taking opposing view of his guests. He would press them to answer his questions. In this respect, Russert made the show less of a press conference and more of a civil courtroom, where he questioned leaders on behalf of his audience, the American people. While some guests may have taken offense to his insistent form of questioning, Russert didn't see it that way. It's not gotcha. It's not trying to get people. What it's trying to do is draw them out with an honest answer, so the American people will say, now that's interesting. It was important to him that his viewers understood the concepts and the policies discussed on the show, so he always tried to talk in a way that the average American could understand. He followed his father's advice. Don't get too fancy. Don't talk that Washington talk. Ask questions that my buddies would want to know about. Tim was recognized for his journalistic approach and integrity multiple times, winning several awards over the years, including the Walter Cronkite Award. We would now like to play some clips from Meet the Press that John Carroll students selected for this virtual exhibit, as we believe that they capture both Russert's distinctive style and substance. Due to the nature of his work, Russert met and debated with nearly every important political leader and expert on the economy in this time. He interviewed Presidents Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, and Senator John McCain. He also spoke to 2 past presidents, Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter, and 3 future presidents, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, who is just starting to think about entering the political arena, and Joe Biden. Russert was a studious man, and regularly he made notes about upcoming interviews. Here we see his preparations for his interview with President George W. Bush. In this February 2004 interview, it was especially divisive for Bush, as it came nearly a year after the invasion of Iraq in 2003.
I believe it is essential. I believe it is essential that when we see a threat, we deal with those threats before they become imminent. It's too late if they become imminent. It's too late in this new kind of war. So that's why I made the decision I made.
Mr. President, the director of the CIA said that his briefings had qualifiers and caveats, but when you spoke to the country, you said there is no doubt. When Vice President Cheney spoke to the country, he said it's no doubt. Secretary Powell, no doubt. Secretary Rumsfeld, no doubt, we know where the weapons are. You said, quote, the Iraqi regime is a threat of unique urgency. Saddam Hussein is a threat that we must deal with as quickly as possible. You gave the clear sense that this was an immediate threat that must be dealt with.
I think if I might remind you that in my language, I call it a grave and gathering threat. I don't want to get in the word contest, but what I do want to share with you my sentiment at the time. There was no doubt in my mind that Saddam Hussein was a danger to America.
In what way?
No doubt. Well, because he had the capacity to have a weapon, make a weapon. We thought he had weapons. The international community thought he had weapons. But he had the capacity to make a weapon and then let that weapon fall into the hands of a shadowy terrorist network.
In October of 1999, Donald Trump appeared on Meet the Press to address speculation that he may run for president, and what his platform might include. Quote, either I run and win, or I just don't run at all, Trump said, despite entering the race soon after he withdrew in February of 2000.
Of course, young people 3 months from now are saying they won't vote for you under any circumstances. Would you then still run?
Well, I would only do this if I felt I could win the election.
Win the
A lot
election?
of people say they're not going to vote, and if you look at those polls, because he's not going to run. There's no way that he's going to run. Why would he run? He gives up a lot by running, and I do. I'm the biggest developer by far in New York. I'm the most successful developer in New York, and New York is the hottest city in the world. So, people say, why would he do this? Why would he run? It's a very great possibility that I will run. And I think those polls will change very rapidly if I say I'd actually run.
Many people who have been watching you, who know you, who like you, say this is all just a public relations stunt. I went back to consult the Bible, your book.
I haven't heard this. Is that true?
Your book. And let me read what you wrote. You can have the most wonderful product in the world, but if people don't know much about it, it's not going to be worth much. You need to generate interest, and you need to create excitement. The point is that if you're a little different, or a little outrageous, or if you do things that
Outside of Meet the Press on Sunday, one of Russert's most memorable moments behind the news anchor happened on election night 2000. That night, the election between presidential hopefuls George W. Bush and Al Gore was too close to call. To track the states still in play and the electoral college points up for grabs, Russert began writing on the back of a legal pad with a black marker. The cardboard got messier and messier as the night went on, so we sent someone out to buy a few dry erase boards. It was on one of those whiteboards that he wrote, Florida, 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 signaling to the viewers that the Panhandle state would have the final say in who would win the presidency. It was simple, effective, and utterly iconic. Another important moment in Russert's career was when he interviewed Vice President Dick Cheney, 5 days after the terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001 at Camp David. It was a tense moment for the country. We had just been attacked, and most were still trying to understand what had happened. Russert's interview with Cheney helped shed light on the decisions the White House had made that day, as well as what the Vice President himself personally experienced. The Vice President talked so candidly about his emotions, what he was going through, the scarcity of information. It was unlike any interview I had ever done, reflected Russert. It was such a profound interview that the episode was re-aired on NBC later that same Sunday. It was the first Meet the Press episode to be re-aired on the same day. In total, 14 million grieving Americans tuned in that night.
We are green top in the shadow of the President's retreat at Camp David. Mr. Vice President, good morning and welcome. Good morning, Tim. This is the first television program to originate from here, which underscores the seriousness of our discussion this morning. The President, the Vice President, and the National Security Team have been meeting for the last 36 hours. What can you share with the American people this morning?
Well, Tim, this is the first chance we've had really since the events this week to sit down and really focus on the various plans and propositions, things we ought to be doing going forward. Up till now, it's been focused very much on trying to manage the crisis and to deal with the problems, the immediate situation. But yesterday, we were able to come out and get everybody together. A lot of work done, staff was done in preparation for it, to sit down and really spend some time looking at what our strategy ought to be and how we ought to proceed.
When the President went to the World Trade Center on Friday, he said, the people who did this will hear from all of us soon. There's an expectation in the country that we're about to pay back big time quickly. What should the people, American people think or feel about that?
I think the important thing here, Tim, is for people to understand that things have changed these last 2 years. The world's shifted in some respects.
Tim Russert's influence on Meet the Press was remarkable. Under his leadership, the show was expanded from a 30-minute program to a full hour. Over 4 million viewers tuned in to watch Russert, and Meet the Press became the most quoted news program in the world. To close out this section, here are a few clips to show the rapport that Russert had with his guests. U.S. Senator and presidential hopeful Hillary Clinton praised Russert's evidence-based approach, even if she thought it was a little one-sided.
Rise war. The resolution you voted for, Robert Byrd said was a blank check for George Bush. Ted Kennedy says was a vote for war. James Carville and Paul Pagala said anyone who says that vote wasn't a vote for war is bunk.
Well, Tim, if I had a lot of paper in front of me, I could quote people who say something very differently. So I know you're very good at this, and I respect it, but let's look at the context here.
In this next interview from 2006, Senator John McCain jokingly references Russert's determined interview style.
This week you talked about people raising your temper as an issue. I read an interview you gave Fortune magazine. You lose battles in politics. I do get good and angry, really angry. By God, I'm not going to let them beat me again. I don't like to lose.
I was laughing when I said that, and I was joking. I spend every day saying to myself, stay calm, stay cool, be passionate, but neither get angry nor personal. And those are 2 important lessons I've learned over the years. I spent a lot of time burning bridges early in my political campaign, political life. Now I work to try to build bridges.
And we'll be watching Senator John McCain. Thanks for joining us and sharing your views.
I haven't had so much fun since my last interrogation.
As a talented interviewer, Russert would push his guests to be honest and truthful. Even so, it's hard to get politicians to be open. This is what happened when Russert asked Senator Bob Dole if he had been completely honest during his interview.
Sense of having some fun, Senator. I want to go back to July 16, 1972. Your first appearance on Meet the Press.
I was scared to death.
You were chairman of the Republican National Committee. You've been on Meet the Press 63 times, which is more than anyone else in history. On this program, have you ever told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Probably not.
Now let me introduce fellow history major Cody Patton, who will present Tim Russert's life beyond the studio.
Family meant quite literally everything to Tim. He held the utmost respect and adoration for his father, who instilled a humble attitude, a respect for others, and a belief that hard work, luck, and God's grace could help you achieve anything. When it came time to be a father himself, Tim followed Big Russ's example and made sure to always spend time with his wife Maureen and his son Luke. Family held such an important place in Tim's life that he wrote 2 books on the concept. The first, Big Russ and Me, focuses on his personal relationship with his father and how Big Russ had influenced his growth as a man and a journalist. It received such a visceral reaction from readers that his second book, Wisdom from Our Fathers, took the concept one step further and highlighted memories from sons and daughters of their fathers from all across the country. Throughout his life, Tim remained a staunch advocate of the power of education. He believed that learning was important, no matter your age, and that it was the duty of the more informed to facilitate the education of those less informed. He did this through his broadcasts, where he presented the American public with the research they did not have the time to do themselves, and through his community work. He often volunteered with the Boys and Girls Club of America, set up scholarship for kids to attend Catholic schools, and regularly spoke to graduating college students about how they could influence the world around them. Anyone who knew Tim Russert would agree that no reflection of his life would be complete without mentioning his love for sports. Growing up, he spent countless hours playing catch in the driveway and attending baseball games with his father, Big Russ. A passionate New York Yankees fan, he especially admired Yogi Berra. But Tim's love for sports reached beyond baseball, embracing all teams from Buffalo and Washington, D.C. Though he had deep ties to both cities, Buffalo held a special place in his heart. Sports were a way for Tim to connect across generations. He, Big Russ, and his son Luke shared many moments watching and playing together. In 1994, the three even attended Super Bowl 28, cheering for the Buffalo Bills. Despite their loss, Tim's loyalty never wavered. He would famously end broadcasts with "Go Bills" and even prayed for the team on air to secure a victory. Tim was a lifelong Buffalo Bills fan, and once he got on the air, he was sure to let everyone know. As you can see from the broadcast, Russert did right before Super Bowl 28 between the Dallas Cowboys and Russert's beloved Buffalo Bills.
I'm sure most of you know about the terrible and misguided decision that President Clinton made this week. He said he was rooting for the Dallas Cowboys, but there is hope. His mother, the first mother as she's referred to, Virginia Kelly, says she's for the Buffalo Bills, and in fact even put a little something down on the Buffalo Bills. I saw her last week in Washington, and I said, "Virginia Kelly, why are you for the Buffalo Bills?" And she said, "Tim, because just like my son Bill, they are the comeback kids." And she's right about the spirit of the city of Buffalo. A little bit of snow or lots of snow or hard economic times has never kept that city down. And so now it's in God's hands. God is good. God is just. Please, God, make tree a charm. Our time has come. Go Bill. That's all for today. We'll be back next week. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. See you then.
If you're tired of the Browns by now, you can shuffle up to Buffalo. You can shuffle up to Buffalo and root for Tim's team. We know he sure would appreciate it. They play Houston at 1 o'clock on Sunday. Now we have a special video message from Tim's son, Luke Russert, who will share his personal reflections of his father. Thank you.
friend at John Carroll University. It's your old pal Luke Russert, and I'm so sorry I was not able to make it to the opening of this very special exhibit honoring my father. My father's years at John Carroll were some of the fondest of his life. That's where he learned about how to build consensus and coming together with people from different backgrounds in order to achieve a common goal. He was class president at John Carroll, which is something he was very proud of. And he used his time there, which was during a very formative period in the United States. He always liked to tell the story about how when he enrolled in 1968, you could only have your hair to a certain length to the collar. You had to put on a nice shirt to go to dinner. And then by 1972, everybody had long hair and Fu Manchu mustaches. So things had progressed pretty quickly. But it was at that time, working with the Jesuit priests who were in charge, that he really was able to understand, hey, people might have two vastly different ideas about how to push an institution forward or come together for a common cause, but they deserve to be heard out and work within the nuance to see what is the best way forward. And that is something that I think really helped him in his journalism career. And he was very proud of John Carroll while he was at Meet the Press. Before he got into TV, he did a stint in politics. And one thing that Senator Moynihan said to my father was, hey, because my dad was intimidated. There was all these guys in the office from Harvard and Yale and Princeton. And my dad said, I don't really know if I'm cut out to be here. And Moynihan said to him, well, Tim, what they have, you can learn. What you have, they will never learn. And those are the values of John Carroll education. And he took that to Meet the Press. And every single week, he worked very hard. And he knew that he was going up against some of the smartest minds in the world. But it was his job to be someone who asked questions on behalf of the American people. And he took that responsibility very seriously. It was a real, almost what I feel, a calling, a Jesuit approach to be men and women for others. What are you doing in that space? And that was something that was very refined at John Carroll. So it is not an exaggeration to say, from the halls of John Carroll to the desk at Meet the Press, there is a direct connection. And my mother and I are so thankful that continues to this day with the John Carroll Fellowship, which has just turned out some of the best kids over all these years. It really is a living testament to everything my father valued. And I know there is a part of this exhibit that talks about my father's Buffalo Bill fandom. I remember one time there was a media critic who said that fandom was a shtick, that he was just doing it to be an everyman to all people. Well, let me tell you something. That was not a shtick. I remember him giving that guy a very civil phone call about how he was a proud Buffalo Bills fan. And I can tell you, he knew all the stats, he knew all the players, he used to read through the roster at the beginning of every season. And towards the end of his life, he even got involved with Buffalo Bills message boards. So you can only imagine who was the captain in the social media age. But I am so happy that part of his life, about his love of Buffalo and the Bills, and also his love of family. I mean, I'm fortunate as his son to know what he meant to so many. But when I had time with my father, which he was very generous with, I knew that it was focused on me. And for someone who was as busy as he was, he gave me that gift of time, which is so incredibly special. So thank you all so much for everything you've done to keep the Tim Russert name alive and well, and for all the students there who are learning from my father. He's someone who had a lot of wonderful lessons, and really in this day and age where truth is hard to decipher from fiction, doing the work, doing the research, and really trying to be an expert about something using fact-based, non-partial research is something that we can all be proud of, and he would be very proud of that you guys are continuing to this day. So thank you very much, everybody there, and a special shout out to Linda and Brent and St. Pete Williams, who we love so much. Go Blue Streaks, take care.
So I'd now like to invite Linda Meglin and Pete Williams to the stage to share some of their personal memories and reflections about Tim Russert.
realized that Luke had been given the power of canonization.
You've just revisited the life of your friend and colleague through the retelling of his story in our new digital exhibit. To begin, I'd like to offer you both the opportunity to share any thoughts that have come to mind after hearing our students reflect on Russert's remarkable life. What memories most stand out to you?
You know, after watching that, I just miss him so much now. I mean, it must be so much memory lane with NBC and everything else, but you know, all those clips remind me so much of the way he was at Carroll. It's that same charm, those eyes and the dimple, and that straightforward and sometimes charming, sometimes insightful, sometimes absolutely deliberate way he asked questions and spoke. So we miss him.
We do indeed. I first got to know Tim when I was working at the Defense Department for Dick Cheney when he was Secretary of Defense, and he was the bureau chief of NBC News in addition to being moderator of Meet the Press. And I would get calls from the bureau chiefs all the time, logistical questions. Can Dan Rather go on an aircraft carrier? Can Peter Jennings be in an F-16? That kind of thing. Tim would be the only bureau chief who called me and asked me substantive questions about Defense Department policy. Why was Cheney doing this? What do you think he meant when he said that? And he would often call just to chat that way. And when Mr. Cheney would go to NBC to be on Meet the Press, I would meet Tim and talk to him. And towards the end of the first Bush administration, George H.W. Bush, Tim said to me one day, you know, I don't think your boss is going to get reelected. And I says, yes, that's pretty obvious. I think that's true. And Tim said, I just want you to know you'll always have a place at NBC. And I took him up on that offer. And it was Tom Brokaw who said that Tim Russert got up every day thinking that he had just won the lottery the day before and eager to make the most of his good fortune that he couldn't believe was actually his. That's certainly true about Tim. He had that same enthusiasm every day. And the thing about Tim is, it's going to shock you to know that not everyone in television is a generous spirit. There is a certain, sometimes icy competitiveness that exists among people on television. Not so with Timothy J. Russert. He was the greatest cheerleader. He wanted you to succeed. Of course, he wanted you to succeed if you're working for him, but he was equally supportive of his competitors at the other network. He was just that kind of person.
So I wanted to give the opportunity for students who've worked on the project to ask questions. So the first student I'm going to invite up is Emily, a history major, and who did all of the awesome marketing for our stuff. And so when you go out and have desserts and you want to view the exhibit, she created this really cool throwback I Spy style themed poster. So I'll throw it to you for the first question.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here too. After watching Tim Russert in the Meet the Press videos, I feel like I gained insight into the 1990s, an era I hadn't explored before, as I usually focus my studies on early American history. Observing the media landscape today, especially on platforms like TikTok, it seems much more influencer-driven, where news is often filtered through personal interpretations. In contrast, Russert's interviews felt like authentic, interactive dialogues, almost like primary sources. My question for you, Mr. Williams, is how did Russert master the art of long-form journalism and genuine conversation in a way that seems rare for my generation today?
It definitely was his contribution to Sunday morning television. And he really changed the course of it for the future, and in a sense changed television interviewing itself. And I think if you asked him, which I did at the time, where did that come from? He would say two things. One is the education he got here at John Carroll, but secondly, law school. Law school here in Cleveland, which forced him to read a huge amount of material and boil it all down into a brief or a courtroom argument. So, you know, some people said that his style on Meet the Press was prosecutorial. I think that misses the point. It was judicial in a way, in the sense that he could never feel that he prepared enough. And the trick, which you sort of got to was he would read what people had said on a given issue and then prepare graphics with the words and put it up on the screen and say, all right, when I asked you about the balance of trade deficit, this is what you said last Thursday. Having said that, they could no longer retreat to their familiar talking points. They were forced to take a next step. That's what he discovered that he could do. By simply reminding them of what they already said, he deprived them of the ability to say it all over again. And they had to take it a step further. And that's one of the reasons why I think the program was so successful and often made a lot of news.
Next, I want to invite up Lauren Seibel. She was on the content creation team. She helped to create the aesthetics and the content on everything you saw. She picked every button, every color. We went back and forth. The buttons were blue, the buttons should be purple. No, let's do John Carroll colors. So, Lauren, I'll let you ask the second question.
Thank you. I think next semester we should work on tracking down the Buffalo Bills boards that he was on.
Yes.
First of all, I want to thank you guys for being here. I think I speak on behalf of everyone when I say we really appreciate you coming to this. As a college student living in a time of intense political polarization, I've been particularly interested in Tim Russert's experiences at JCU during the late 1960s and early 1970s, when he served as head of both the student government and the university club, especially in connection to pivotal events like the Warrensville Road Vietnam War protests during this time. Ms. Meglin, my question to you is, given his leadership roles, could you share more about what he was like as a leader and what our campus was like during this era of polarization in the US? How did he navigate those challenges? And what impact did he leave with his peers?
First, Lauren, you did a great job, really good job. It was a different time. And many of us who were, at Carroll during the 70s, early 70s, were first generations to go to a college. And I think the whole idea of we were children of parents who wanted us to succeed and had a different attitude in that we better mind our P's and Q's and do what we were told. But then with Vietnam, it was a whole different kind of attitude because the kids, the guys were getting drafted, so we were kind of standing up, but we didn't really want to get into trouble about it. So there was this back and forth. And it wasn't like it is now with such vitriol. There were the folks who were in ROTC, which was the Army, training corps for leadership roles, and then there were hippies. And so even though people had different attitudes, nobody was contentious. We did have a couple of campus, I don't want to say riots, they were just, there was a sit-in, but it was so brief, and Tim was there, and Tim had a wonderful way of talking to both sides, and as a leader, he didn't pacify people, but he spoke to both issues. So he was much like he was on Meet the Press in that he was a wonderful diplomat, but yet very aware of people's attitudes and not trying to influence and not trying to incite. It was very, very calm, he was just a natural. And as I said, he had a great way with people and he just was able to make people feel important. And I think that was his strongest characteristic and attribute that we still feel with him on Meet the Press.
Next, I want to invite up Anna Maxwell. Anna is exploring her major options here at John Carroll, and she dove into this project really as a student in the Corps, and she was part of the team that watched 17 years worth of Meet the Press episodes. I would see her in the computer lab going back and forth trying to find the exact right Buffalo Bills clip. So Anna, I will give the mic to you.
Thank you so much. Yes, as Dr. McAndrews said, I was on the video team, and so what we had to do was go back and look at all of the Meet the Press clips that you saw, and we watched a lot more than that. But we got to see a lot about Tim Russert and how he interviewed and how he really was thinking about the tough questions and able to ask those questions. And I think that we've touched on that a lot tonight. But it was a really cool experience to kind of get to know Tim Russert professionally through those videos. And so my question to you guys, Mr. Williams and Ms. Meglin, you knew him on a personal level, and I got to meet him kind of in a professional way through those videos. So do you have any fond memories that you'd like to share specifically about him? Or also, do you feel that he was different on screen versus off screen?
Well, certainly no difference on screen versus off screen, except that sometimes off screen he was a little, say, saltier in his language, perhaps. There were FCC rules that didn't exist in his office. Tim looked like a truck hit an unmade bed, and he would be the first to admit that to you. You know, Tim, unlike again some people in television, didn't come to NBC with stars in his eyes thinking he was going to be on television. He had to be persuaded and cajoled into taking Meet the Press, and he really felt like the classic I have a face for radio kind of person, and didn't want to be on television. And he was, you know, eventually persuaded that he should do it. But he was keenly aware of this sort of everyman image. And at a time when many of his peers would be buying bespoke, tailored outfits, Tim received his blue blazer every now and then in a box from Eddie Bauer. And, you know, he was proud of that. He didn't want to, you know, be more than he was. He cultivated that everyman image. And I think the other thing about it is, just the way he looked and just his personality, he was this big sort of brawling, you know, guy next door, sitting next to you, eating a hot dog at the football game. And that gave him the ability, I think, to ask the tough questions without seeming like a smart aleck. He just had an honesty about him, and he, you know, it's not that he wasn't aware of that. It was an image that he carefully cultivated, but it came to him naturally. And I would just say one other thing. Remember that Tim's background and love was politics. He was a political science major here at JCU. He went to law school, not that he wanted to practice law, because he thought it would open doors to him, perhaps in the world of politics. And he worked for the governor of New York, and he worked for a senator from New York. He loved politics. He loved politicians, and he loved politics as the art of doing things to help people. And I think that also is one of the things that illuminates his interviews. He wanted to hold people to account because he thought this is, you know, this is what you're doing is sacred.
You know, when the clip came up about him going to ask for the interview with the Pope, it reminded me so much of his kind of chutzpah to go and ask Jules Belkin to come and bring all these fabulous concerts. He had no fear. He was just going to do it because, well, it had to be done. And so they had no idea. Jules Belkin had no idea who he was. He just called him and goes, Tim Russert, and he goes, who's Tim Russert? You know, and they had this wonderful relationship. And so we had these just fabulous concerts here. We were just talking about it at dinner. It was Chicago and Edgar Winter, Cat Stevens, Linda Ronstadt, here at John Carroll in the gym. I mean, it was absolutely wonderful. And Bruce Springsteen. So that was such a foreshadowing of his interest and his courage to go and say, hi, I'm Tim Russert. Can I see you, Mr. Pope? You know, absolutely so Tim Russert-like. And to your point about his everyman, I think the other part of it is he was so curious. If you sat down and talked to him, he would ask you a million questions about yourself and get you to talk about yourself. And then the next day, he would remember everything about you, everything. And I think that was you know, it was here at Carroll, and I think it was the same at Meet the Press.
Next question to Kaylee Kelly. Kaylee is a master's student at John Carroll, and she hopes to be in early childhood education. teacher. She helped to create this entire event, this public history event that we're all enjoying right now.
Thank you, Dr. McAndrew. Ms. Meglin and Mr. Williams, we are so blessed that you're here. Thank you for sharing all of these memories of Tim Russert. I can say that we truly felt him and his presence in this room. My question for you both is, could you share any final reflection on Tim Russert's faith? How did he live out his Catholic identity in his daily life?
Well, Ed Carroll, he was a good spirit, but you didn't really see him in the chapel on Sunday morning. So I wouldn't feel any bad things about him, but he didn't.
He had a direct line.
Yeah, probably. And you as a saint would know that. But I think you don't have to do all those kinds of things to be truly Catholic. I think his goodness, and I think he had a whole thing about inclusivity, and it was a natural thing. It wasn't the trendy thing. He just wanted to make sure everybody was included, and whether it was a party or a mixer or because he was the U Club president, he was very encompassing and very much, let's get together. Oh, who are you? Oh, come with us. That kind of thing, which I think is a very Jesuit-esque way of living your life.
Is as much a part of his life as his height, as his speech, as his voice. It was just a natural part of him. He was intensely proud of his Catholic faith, and I think demonstrated it through a lot of charitable work. He was hugely active in the Boys and Girls Club, felt it very important for us to bring in people from the community to work at NBC News. I don't know what the right way to say this is. I think he was so deeply proud of his Catholic faith, and it always bothered him a little bit if people tried to lord their faith over others. I think of an example. There was a cabinet member that I used to cover who made a big point about being sort of proudly evangelical. And he would invite reporters to come up to his office and have lunch. And if you came with your brown bag, he would immediately make a big show of, well, before we say anything, let's say grace. I told Tim that, and it bugged him. He thought, well, that's just a little inappropriate. So Tim was invited to have lunch with him. And the guy walks into the room, sits down, and Tim says, before we go any further, let's say grace. So he got the last word in. I'll just say one other thing. Tim was a great advocate for all of us who worked for him. We deal in a business that has executives that come and go, that have, maybe they like you, maybe they don't like you. And there was a period of time when a new president of NBC News came in and called Tim Russert and said, I need you to fire 4 people off your staff. Robert Hager, Pete Williams, Lisa Myers, and Andrea Mitchell. Now, at the time, we were the 4 people who were doing the most stories on NBC Nightly News. But he said, they just look old. And Tim said, I'm not going to do that. Now, this is the president of NBC News, Tim's boss. And Tim said, no, I'm not going to do that. And that's the kind of guy Tim was. It didn't hurt that Tim was the next door neighbor on Nantucket to Jack Welch, who was the chairman of NBC. It didn't hurt. Nonetheless, that was the kind of guy Tim was. He stood up for his people, and we were very loyal to him for that. And I just want to say, Tim, pardon me. I'm here because of Tim Russert for 2 reasons. One is that John Carroll University was terribly important to him. And the second reason is he hired me. I wouldn't be here without it. So I'm tremendously proud of the work that you all did in keeping Tim's memory and his legacy alive. So thank you.
We have time for 2 questions from the crowd, if you'd like to take a quick question. And I'm going to have Cody pass around the microphone. But before that, I wanted one more round of applause for Maddie Shade. Student number one on this project, literally opening up boxes and saying, oh, 2004 baked beans, when, finding all of the different treasures and telling all of the stories. So check out the baked beans at the table. But thank you, Maddie, for all your work. And because of your work and the work of other students here, we also wanted to announce officially that we're going to keep the Tim Russert Public History internship in the library. Students are going to start next semester processing the collection, putting together a finding aid, and kind of, doing the work of professional historians. So excited to see this project continue to evolve. Time for 2 brief questions.
Thank you so much for the entire presentation tonight. It's been incredibly insightful and emotional to hear all your impactful moments and fond memories of your time with Tim Russert as well as the students. I'm curious what you think Tim Russert's legacy has done not only for NBC but for what you would consider this new version of ethical or fonder reporting when we deal with people in the political sphere.
Well, I think his influence still very much is in the minds of people who are running Meet the Press these days. Kristen Welker, David Gellis, who's the executive producer. They're very mindful. This is the house that Tim built. There's still people on that staff that he hired. There's still people walking the hallways at NBC that he hired. There are a lot of people in the building now who weren't there when Tim was there, but they're well aware of his influence. And, he set a standard that I think people still aspire to meet. It was true of the people who came after him, David Gregory, Chuck Todd, and now Kristen. And I think to some extent it's rubbed off on some of the other Sunday shows. So I think that's true. I also want to say I express a certain appreciation and respect for the people who had to pour through all of Tim's boxes, because in addition to all the great things he was America's biggest pack rat.
My question's for Mr. Williams. I know you talked a little bit about his influence coming from law school and John Carroll in terms of Meet the Press, but I was just wondering, what impact did Big Russ have in terms of his ability to be an interviewer and just a person as a whole?
Well, that's really the key to it all. He is, more than anything else, Big Russ's son. And truly, first of all, I think Big Russ, gave him a lot of lessons in life about being respectful and being diligent and working hard. And, obviously Tim did not perform the kind of manual labor that his father did, for which he was deeply respected, but by God, he better put in the hours. And so that, I think, is the foundation of Tim's work ethic. But Big Russ was Tim's barometer. And from day one through the very last days that Tim was on Meet the Press, the first person he'd call after every show was Big Russ. How did it go? What'd you think? Well, Timmy, I didn't think that question was too smart. So that was terribly important to him. Tim, Big Russ was his lodestar throughout his entire life.
So, as you go out into the atrium, I'd love for you to grab one of these I Spy photos and see if you can spy a QR code, and then take your phone to it, and that will bring you to this web exhibit. You can download it on your phone as an app, so maybe you have Uber Eats, Target. You can also have the Tim Russert virtual exhibit on your phone, or you can visit it on a web browser as well. So that's here for you. And then, as our special gift to you as well, on the back of this, we printed the Springsteen poster. So if you want to put that up in your dorm room, I think it would be a great thing. So thank you, everybody, and enjoy the exhibit.
Thank you.